Hello and welcome to the final part of the Eduard Spitfire buddy build with a great friend of mine, Rick. And in this, my final part, I'm proper stepping out of my comfort zone. I don't normally do this at all, but I'm going to make a base. And I kind of have to really, because Rick is doing his Spitfire in a diorama, and I thought, he's stepping well out of his comfort zone by doing an aeroplane, so I should do the same in my own way. It all started with this small cheap box frame, and I got some Das clay, taping the outside because I didn't want any clay to get onto the actual frame itself, and then I just squished it in place. So using quite a bit of water here, water on the base to help it stick because it wouldn't stick originally, and then with plenty of water and wet hands trying to smooth everything out. The airfields were fairly flat by nature, and I wanted it as flat as I could. I took one of the aeroplanes, and just by pushing down on top of the wheel, I created an impression, sort of little gap, not a depression really, for the wheels to sit in, and just using the back of a knife, same for the tail wheel. So this means that the aeroplane is not going to be sort of floating above it, it's actually going to be part of the scene. Once I managed to finally get the lid off this VMS PVA glue, it was spread with an oil brush. And this is going to be for the groundwork. So the clay at the moment is now pretty much dry. You can see there I've actually removed it from the frame and I've just put some tape because I don't want any sort of gluey blah interfering with the fit. It doesn't take that long to dry, but it doesn't dry that instantly. Now this stuff, this is actual desert. So I should say really, dirt from my desert, trademark. Little ode to another famous YouTuber who's way better at dioramas than I am. So yeah, this was sifted just to get the fine stuff, and then sprinkled over the glue, and then I'm just patting it down there just to make sure it sticks. And some of the smaller kind of rocks and pebbles and things, these were just sprinkled over. Some bigger ones as well, as you can see there, some little stones. And I'm just trying to put these sort of randomly, but not where the aeroplane would be. So they've kind of been brushed to one side to enable the aeroplane to not run over any sort of rocks and get punctures or damage the undercarriage or anything. Now this is crushed up of the clay that's dry. This was these are kind of more angular bits and pieces, and it's I'm just trying to make it look busy. Some of the bigger bits had to be glued in place with actual PVA. Now fortuitously, some of the clay I could cut into rough kind of block shapes. There was a lot of bombed out buildings, a lot of the revetments were made out of destroyed buildings, and I just wanted to depict that. It is Malta after all, so some of these kind of square shapes that I'd cut I kind of made into a little pile, as if maybe they're left over from revetments, weren't needed, and they were just kind of pushed to one side in this little pile. Now another trick that's been shamelessly stolen from Uncle Night Shift is just using with a pipette, wetting the area with alcohol. So I kind of out of sync here actually, but I'm watering down the PVA, then I wet it with the alcohol, and then just going to use a pipette, and I'm just going to use this heavily diluted PVA to fix all those sort of pebbles, rocks, all that kind of stuff. Just fix that all in place. So here I go. And you can see what happens is it kind of spreads out. It's obviously very thin. And then I just went in with this kind of fine dust really over the top of that. That will help blend in some of these pebbles and rocks and things. And just using a cocktail stick, while it was all still damp, I just cleaned out the little depressions for the wheels. Now it's time for painting. And this is Mr. Surfacer Black. If I'd had mahogany, I would have used that, but I didn't. So I didn't. I just used the black. And at some point, I managed to set all the fire alarms off, which is why it looks a little bit incomplete there. So I had to rapidly vacate. Anyway, once all the fire alarms were reset and I could go back into the building, I sprayed on the base coat. So this is Tamiya, a mix of kind of wood and buff. And you can see some of the black is still showing there. I thought it was a bit too dark though, so using the new Atom paint from Ammo, I just went over the top with that, and that, as you can see, does a really good job of doing some sort of highlights. It's all about, I think, depth at this stage and getting variations in tone, doing a sort of swirly motion just to keep it a little bit random, but I'm concentrating it over where these pebbles are. Bit more of an intensive colour there, and you can see the two round circles on the bottom right. That's for oil drums, and I purposely left that a bit dark. Now for a bit of variation in the sandy tone. So using some Ammo oil brusher, I dabbed it on, and then some thinner with this brush, I just kind of blended it in like a wet blend. And this is going to make a sort of more patchy, random look to things. And as you can see, it does take quite a bit of blending. The sort of sandy, dusty material, it does kind of soak everything up. So I did use quite a bit of thinner here. You see, going in with a lot more. Just trying to melt, if you like, the oil paint and blend it in. I don't want any hard edges. Just going in with a little final blending now. And there we go. Quite a nice effect, I think. And just removing some of the oil paint from the rocks. We'll deal with those in a second. Now for a darker wash, just around the sort of shadow areas. Again, it's all about depth here. Maybe a little bit of dampness, early morning, that kind of thing. And you can see there this darker wash that I made up. Classic pin wash, if you like. Just around that detail. Now it does spread out a bit as well. So I will go in and blend those edges. Again, just trying to get some variations in the tone. Now for actually the fun bit, and I thought this was going to be quite tedious, but no, it was a lot of fun. So getting some acrylic paint, I was just picking out all this kind of raised detail. So the bricks, some of the stones, and some of the smaller pebbles, with different sort of sandy, buff, stone type tones, Just going in backwards and forwards, sometimes going over multiple times with different tones, just to break things up a bit. But I do want to highlight these. I don't want them to be a little bit of a feature. I don't want them sort of disappearing, if you like. So using these lighter tones, just dabbing in some of the smaller rocks. And this is going to create sort of highlights, volume, depth, that kind of stuff. And that's it. The base is pretty much done now. Moving to these oil drums. Found them in the stash. I believe they're from Bronco, so they were just made up. And then base coated with this kind of very dark grey brown tone as a base coat. I have no idea what colour they were, even if they were used at all. Some hairspray was then sprayed on, and then a rusty brown tone over the top, concentrating around the rim, around the top, and around the sort of filler cap area. And then using this brush and some water, I just went in and chipped it away. There we go. That's the kind of finished result. Really nice and worn. But we're not done yet. So I mixed up this lighter rusty brown colour and went over, did some streaking, concentrated it in some of the areas, adding more depth essentially. And sponge chipping. So this is a dark chipping colour, again from Ammo. Just picking out some of the highlights. And again, adding to all these different layers that are going to provide volume and depth. I wasn't going to do any oil drums or anything like that, but seeing Rick is making such an effort, I thought I ought to. Now this stuff is great. If you haven't used it, it's dry brushing paint. It's acrylic, and who'd have thought someone could make acrylic dry brushing paint, but it dry brushes brilliantly. So I just wanted to enhance some of this sort of rust with this orangey rusty tone. And you can see it just does a neat job of just adding to that whole rusty effect. And concentrating there, you can see over that sort of opening and on the top. More dry brushing paint now. This is the chipping tone, and I'm just going to try and catch the highlights now. Hopefully with the sort of more orangey tone, spreading that around a bit, this is going to just catch those highlights. This is enamel Trax wash, and I use this all the time. If you look back on the exhaust separate episode I did, I use it on that, and the word ubiquitous comes to mind. I use this really quite often, this tone. So this is just going to enhance some of those shadows, just tapping it in or brushing it on. And then we'll wait till it's dry, and then when it's dry we'll go in and we'll blend. Just doing some streaking now, just from the top where the sort of dampness would run down, from the sort of filler caps. And there we go, we'll just go in and start blending. So tiny bit of thinner on the brush. Switching to a flat brush now for the streaking. And this brush is great. So when you turn it through 90 degrees like that, you can actually sharpen up some of those streaks. Just wanted to add a little bit of dampness, old fuel that's collected a whole load of dirt. So using this darker tone, I went in and repeated it. So you can see this is the other one. It's less rusty than the other one. And I just didn't want them both looking identical. So one was a little bit more rusty, the other one was a little bit more dusty. And then finally going with this black brown tone for some really dirty effects. Now for the dust, it's important to use the dust here to just integrate it into the base. Otherwise I think it would look a little bit silly. So using the same oil brushes that I used on the base, I just went in, dabbed it in to certain places, and then went in and blended it all with this brush. Doing some dust there, you can see concentrating on the top and then around the bottom as well, and some streaking. And then once they were finished, I could glue them in place. Okay, popping over to Rick. Let's see how he's getting on. He's a lot more clever at editing than I am. So here's his finished aeroplane, all weathered up. Just a few little bits and pieces to go. He's done a brilliant job on that. I really like how he's used all these kind of post shading effects to simulate the worn paint and the dust and the dirt. Looks awesome. And yeah, told you he's a bit of a master. So here he is, just integrating it into his base. And that's it, almost finished. Mine is finished. I'm going to leave you with some of my finished pictures. And at the end, by the time I get to it, Rick will have finished his. So I'll add Rick's at the end. And I really hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I have. I've had such a lot of fun. Spitfires are always great, but the chance to do some Spitfires in some unusual schemes, to go to town on the weathering, and then to finish it all off with the base and doing it alongside Rick, learning from him, a dyed-in-the-wool armour sci-fi diorama guy. I've really picked up quite a few really neat little hints and tricks that I'm going to use on my next model. So I'll leave you with a bit of a montage, and I'll see you on the next project. So thanks very much for watching. Pop over and have a look at Rick's as well, and I'll see you then. So cheers, bye bye.